Hello, hello. Welcome to Human Design Coffee Talk.
Welcome back.
It's just Teresa and I today, no guest.
Yeah, we're just gonna meander about a couple of things. We were on the phone earlier and we were talking about the flow of life and how your authority connects you to the flow of life. And we were like, life is smarter than us.
Mm-hmm.
And our bodies are tuned into that, or our authority is tuned into that. And we're like, that's a podcast episode.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are. We're just going to talk about a variety of topics. We also have some questions that we've gotten in the DMs, just people wanting to elaborate on certain things that we've maybe spoken about on past podcasts or talked about on Instagram. So we're just going to flow and see what comes through.
Yeah, I just got trapped in a yawn. No choice. Um, yeah, so life being smarter than us. I think that, we all have those times where we look at something outside of ourselves, like a plant that's like I don't know why I just saw this. A plant like coming through the concrete, like it's gonna find a way. It's smarter than we think. We think there's no hope. We think it's not gonna make it. But there's always that divine intelligence. And I think that gets lost a lot in the human design space, the conversation about things that are greater than us, the divine intelligence of nature, of the universe, of all of that. There's this kind of like slingshot thing that happens when a lot of people find human design somewhere along the way on their path in spirituality of finding out who they are. And then we kind of like hop over to one side real quick and it's like human design, and then we lose and we forget that human design is a mystical system, we lose the mysticism of it and that divinity and that um, connection to things greater than us and nature. Um, and we kind of forget that life is smarter than us, that we think that even though human design is a system, we're going to be in passenger consciousness. We're still trying to grab the wheel.
Yeah, I mean, we just end up using the information from the system as a way to mentally, it just gives the mind more ammo,
Mm-hmm.
and you start to realize that the more you observe life and with or without human design, but you start to really just see how we don't have control. And
Mm-hmm.
thank God that we know about design because it affirms our minds of something we may or may not have figured out. But what I really have seen over the last couple of years, and this was something that we were talking about that sparked all of this, is our minds don't know what the right timing is of things. Our minds could be tuned into something that is correct for us
Mm-hmm.
or aware of something that we might end up doing or aware of a bodily response to something, but the timing is actually what's so important. So, do you want to talk
Yeah.
about what's been going
Yeah.
on with work for you?
Well, so at Inner Space, so I've said this many times on this podcast, I'm behind the scenes. I'm building it, growing it, establishing a solid foundation for it to live on. And before human design or before human design, before I opened Inner Space, I was a hairdresser, but I also was an energy worker, energy medicine, saw clients one on one, did a lot of that. And I moved away from that to build up Inner Space, but I always knew and had a feeling, and I would respond to these random, what I would think random in the moment, these random things that I could, tools, techniques, information, data that I could see myself like putting all of those together. And I would share about it with people, and they'd be like, oh, you should do that and do that and do that. And when are you going to do that thing? And I didn't have the response to start. And so I would actually kind of like beat myself up a little bit, like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not doing the thing? And then I realized I just didn't have the things in place. Like, just because I could see it happening and somebody else could see it happening, or somebody else could look at me and say, hey, you have all the things you need. My response is what's important because the energy behind it is going to make that thing sustainable. And so when I'm responding to something externally, where I have that bodily response, where I have that and if you're a generator, you know what I'm talking about, where it's like go time. If I wait until I have that feeling, then the things like seem to line up. And I
Mm.
don't have to do so much heavy lifting. I don't have to beat my head against a wall of resistance trying to force something to happen. And that's recently happened at work, like getting my independent practice, not independent because it's within inner space, all together and all set up and all the things. Like I knew I was going to be doing this like a year and a half, 2 years ago. As far as even exactly what it looks like right now, I knew what that was, almost 2 years ago. And so it's finally like happening. And everyone around me is like, yeah, we knew you were going to be doing this. And even me, I'm like, yeah, but it wouldn't be this. If I did this 2 years ago, it wouldn't be how it feels right now. It's effortless. Everything is lined up. I just have to speak about it. And somebody's like, oh, I would like to do that. I would like to meet with you and do that thing. So trusting the timing. And also, a lot of that was reminding the people around me that I, to assist me in trusting the timing, you
Mm.
know, conversations around like, no, I know when I'm ready, not letting other people push me. Nobody was like pushing me, but those little subtle little nudges where people are like, "Hey," where I would start to push myself or mentally nudge myself in places that I shouldn't be yet because it wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And now it's just like my excitement about the thing. We had ordered something for my office and I was up front at the front desk talking to my business partner about it and I was just so excited and there was a woman in the front listening to my excitement and she's like, "Oh," and I was like, "Sorry, I'm just so excited. I finally get to like meet with people one on one and I just ordered this thing." And she's like, "Oh, what's that going to be?" And I explained it to her. She's like, "I've been wanting you guys to do something like that. Like I've been waiting for somebody here to do that thing." And I'm like, "I'm doing that thing." And she's like, "I want to do that thing." So we signed her up for an appointment with me and I was just like, that. And then I looked at my business partner. I was like, "That's what I'm talking about. That's why I waited."
Yep. Yep.
Because I didn't have to like go out and grab anything or go out and push my agenda on anybody. It's just like, boop, right there.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, you've had an office for what, a year and a half, 2 year, or
A year
last
about.
summer or
Yeah,
something?
last
Yeah.
summer. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'd had so many conversations around this, but I think I know you well enough now to where I can feel when you just don't have the energy for something, because this
Yeah.
is the you that has the energy, the
Yeah.
one I'm
Yeah.
talking to right now
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
has the energy for something. And even when you
Yeah.
first got your office, you were just like, yeah, I got an office. Yeah, it's there. Yeah. And you had all the energy to set it up. And then you were just like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Because it
Like
needed to look, I mean, it needed to look nice when people like walk down the hallway. They're like, "What's in that room?" I'm like, "That's my office." "What are you doing there?" "I don't know yet."
nothing. And then you're like, oh, massage person is renting it out for the day or
Yeah.
whatever. I'm like,
Yeah.
why aren't you using it though? But I knew
Yeah.
not to poke you too much about it because I'm just like, I don't know. When she's ready, it's all going to happen.
Yep.
And I don't know. Cause you'd be like, yeah, I don't
Mhm.
know why I'm not taking clients now.
Right.
Or, it's so normal for the mind to be like, but why? Why aren't you doing
Yeah.
this? Why? It's like the mind is just poking you all day. Well, you set this up. Why aren't you doing it now?
Mhm. Mhm. Well, because a lot of me thought it was going so it has nothing to do with human design either. We're doing this wellness concierge service at Innerspace because I'm like, one of my biggest things at Innerspace that is a must is that we have resources and to support anybody that walks in the door, whether we have them inside of the space or outside of the space, right? And so what I saw a while ago, um, I'm inner vision in my environment, so I get lots of like mental images, like snapshots. And I saw like a hotel, somebody's visiting the city and they go to the concierge desk at the hotel and they say like, "Hey, we're here. What are some fun things to do?" And the concierge knows everything. Everywhere to go, depending on what food you like, depending on if you like to dance or not, what kind of environment you want, and then they send you out, right? And that concierge is not responsible for your experience, but there is some responsibility of like, um, what's the word? When someone comes into your house and like you take care of them. The word just slipped my mind. Anyway, hospitality,
Yeah.
maybe. um, where that person is very well informed and can make decisions on the fly that are unique for each person. And it's not just this cookie cutter, this is for you, go here, sending everybody to the same place doing the same thing. And I do that at Inner Space anyways. When I'm there, I'm talking to people, and I was like, I would really like to have one-on-one sit-down conversations with people to talk to them about what's going on in their life physically, mentally, emotionally, and how what we have or who I know in the community can help them. And I want to do this for free. So that's what I'm doing. And I had my first client a week ago, and I have two more set up, and I haven't even like announced anything out or pushed anything out through Inner Space or anything. It's just been like while I've been like chit chatting about it at work and someone's overheard, they're like, "Oh, what's that? What are you doing?" And my first client is going really well. So what we do is we just do a check-in, and I let them let the things out that are heavy for them and that are alive for them right now, and what's present for them, and how are they physically feeling, emotionally feeling. And then from there, I have like a giant toolbox of my own certifications and trainings that I can help them with in the moment. And then I also create a plan for them at Inner Space and make any referrals out of Inner Space that need to be made.
Mm.
And my first client right now, we're working on something physically. And instead of taking supplements, she's doing the biocharger. And in 1 week, her and I are both blown away by
Wow.
how amazing she's feeling, and the physical symptoms that she was having are disappearing, and it's just been incredible, and I'm just so stoked.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Uh-huh. So I get to just do what I love, which is that.
And
That's
you're such a solutions person. Like
yeah.
you're the person, like if I'm going to come to you about something, I'm like, I got to be prepared for solutions
Yeah.
because you're like solutions oriented.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this just allows you to be yourself in that way. It's like people are
Totally.
specifically coming to you for the
Yeah.
solutions that you have in your toolbox. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I have all of
Yeah.
these.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm so solutions oriented that with my close friendships and relationships, I have to say, like, do you want me to just listen or do you want a solution?
Mm-hmm.
Because I will have a ton, you know?
Ton.
It doesn't mean you have, and I'm just giving people shit to respond to too. It's not like I take it personally. If you don't take my solution, I don't care. But
Right.
I got one. I got one. There's lots of parts of my chart that will point to that, but like a lot of it is, I have channel preservation and I'm tribal and I want to take care of you and support you and preserve the parts of you that you feel are lacking or inadequate, or aren't as um, healthy, quote unquote, healthy, whatever that means for you. Um, and like, how can you get back to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
But
that's my fucking jam, dude.
yeah, it's like being able
It's,
to use your intuition and
yeah.
your solutions.
Yeah.
And sometimes
Yeah.
they're quite logical. You
Right.
know, the spleen, I
Mhm.
think about the
Mhm.
logic circuitry that's in the
Mhm.
spleen.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. And so the way I feel about it now, I look around my life and talk going back to timing and life being smarter than us, is that if I would have tried to push this out earlier, there are so many other things that have happened in my life that were taking up my capacity at that time that if I would have started it, I would have not been able to fulfill my end of the bargain. And I would have failed somebody, or myself. I don't think not for myself, but I would have failed somebody, or I wouldn't have been able to give them that attention to detail that they deserve.
Yeah.
And now I can.
Yeah. I also think you just needed more structure and getting
Yeah.
in the habit of like being back at work. And
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we've talked about this where, before I got a job again and had that structure in my life, like I felt like I was just floating. Like when
Mhm.
you're entirely
Mhm.
self-employed, whether it's like you or you have a brick and mortar and you have people taking care of the business and you just are
Yeah.
able to kind of like come in and out when you need to be, or
Yeah.
like me who like everything's on my shoulders and I can get what I put into it or not.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
There's no structure to it. There's
Right.
you have to create the structure or else you're just floating, and that works for some people. That doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's also nice to have that. I think that's probably a part of most folks' deconditioning process is to have
Mhm.
that structureless life for a period of time because our lives are pretty much structured from the day we start going to school as kids. And
Mhm.
so then I feel like when you have a bit of freedom, if life just arranges it to where you have some time to not have structure, there is indulging in that of
Right.
like, oh, it feels good just being able to wake up and be like, what do I actually feel like doing today?
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
I
what am I responding to, right? For us, it was like that deconditioning of like, what it would it be like to just wake up and only do what I respond to? And we've
yeah.
talked about that on previous coffee talks.
Yeah, but then it's also like the way I see it is if I'm responding to a job, I'm responding to the structure that comes with that job.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
for 2 years or whatever, I was not responding to any jobs and I was only responding to doing my own work. And that worked for that time. But then I stopped only responding to that. I responded to a job. And so the way I looked at it at the time was like there was this grieving period where I went back to work and I'm like, oh my God, I can't just do whatever I want all the time. And
Right.
I'm not really in charge of my own schedule anymore. Like, I have responsibility like that.
Yeah.
And that was difficult at first, but then at the same time, there was some relief with it. And that's such a signpost for me now is when I make a
Mhm.
decision, do I feel relief?
Mhm.
And it's like, even though I knew it was going to bring some more difficulty or challenges or whatever to my life, it's brought immense relief.
Well, for people like us that are so floaty, Teresa and I are three parts right, right brain, right mind, right in our environment. Um, also letting life create the structure.
Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
didn't create the structure. We talked about this on a previous episode about gate 60 lifting, and it was like go time, right? Hilariously, gate 60 dropped back yesterday. And, or no, was it yesterday? Today? Tomorrow? When is
I
it?
think it was yesterday.
Yesterday. Yeah. Um, and yesterday being May 23rd. Oh, yeah. It was like at like 8:08 p.m. or 7:08.
I sent you a text because I have like calendar updates for the transits.
Yeah.
I was like, dun, dun, dun.
Ironically, I have like 4 days off after it. I'm like, oh God, I'm back to
Back to limitation.
no.
Back to the snow globe.
But like letting life set up that structure, right? So that I could get in that flow and then I could feel that energy. And then I'm like, oh, okay, this is good for me. And not trying because mentally I would get so frustrated if I tried to create the structure myself. It never worked out. And
Yeah.
so life, it was smarter than me. It created the structure and then it shows me externally as a generator what I'm responding to or not. And it's just going back to those foundational pieces of human design that really I'm like, oh yeah, duh. Because, once you get so deep into information overload of human design and studying and lectures and, we listen to lectures for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you can get so thick in the weeds that you're like, oh yeah, well, the soil that the weeds are growing out of
Right.
is
I think that's a rite of passage. I posted about this on my Instagram yesterday. Like if you haven't integrated a system, it doesn't mean shit.
right.
It's
Hmm.
all just information. And I think that's a rite of passage for a lot of systems, like particularly one like human design that's
Absolutely.
so freaking mental. But it's like you just drench and saturate yourself with all the
Uh-huh.
information, but you have no idea what it really means. And to me, when I learn about something, if I don't digest it and then look around in my life and wait to observe it and actually see it play out multiple times, then
Mhm.
that information doesn't really mean anything to me.
Right.
It's just candy for your mind, then. It's just giving you something to think about,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not actually in your system
Hmm.
and integrated into your life and your beingness and all of that. And so it doesn't matter how much information you have.
Hmm. Like the deep, deep dive lectures, like all that's just chilling in my brain. Is it integrated? No. Am I talking
Mm.
about it? No. But it's in there, and then I can watch it, and then I could probably in like 5 or 6 years start externalizing about it, what I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing from an integrated perspective, because um, that's just that's how I operate better. That's how
Yeah.
it feels better in my body. It feels better when I'm sharing with other people about things. That's
Mm-hmm.
why you'll hear me a lot. Also, fourth line, the foundations really feels important to me. But
Yeah.
I like the basics, the mastery of the basics. There's a quote. I have it on our website.
It's okay. Don't worry about it.
The
Just
mastery
like
of the basics is
undefined
something
Aja
well
in real
done.
time trying to remember something.
Anyway,
Wait, what was
what?
it? Sorry, I interrupted you when you were saying it.
No, I can't fucking
Oh,
remember.
okay. I thought you said it. Oh man. Um, I was gonna
It's
say, like, the basics are so important, but it's like so funny how we don't even understand the basics until it's integrated. You could hear something
mm-hmm,
so simple like for example, I was talking about this on my stories yesterday, how if you have your solar plexus connected to your throat, then you're going to speak with emotionality in your voice. No matter where you're at in your wave, even a low is still emotionality, right? So there's going to be that timbre to your voice, that resonance of emotionality. And as a 1222, my whole life I've had moments or interactions with people where I've been just speaking like I am right now, just expressing passion about something, getting really fired up about a topic. It could have nothing to do with the person I'm talking to. And I can feel them like almost like a deer in the headlights when I get really passionate about something. Or, there have been times where I am in a confrontational situation with somebody and I'm speaking with emotionality. And again, they're taking it personally. They're acting like it's directed at them when it's just the way that my voice sounds and it's how I speak. And I could hear that. I could hear, okay, solar plexus is connected to your throat. You're going to speak with emotionality. And if I didn't have that real life experience and then also observing it play out, because I feel like usually when I am learning about something actively, there's opportunities that come to me to learn about it. Or I'll just notice it in other spaces. I'll
mm-hmm,
notice it in other people and then I'll notice it in myself. And that's all part of that integration process. It's like this refinement process. We're like, oh, okay, there's an idea. Now let's look for opportunities for that to be true.
mm-hmm.
Like, let's look for examples of that in my life. Let's witness that in myself and in others. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, I know a lot of like 35, 36s and 1222s, and we all kind of, our voices sound different, but we do have that. Like a 1222 has like a sing-songiness quality to their voice where it kind of goes up and down. And there's this, it's almost like a songbird sometimes when
Mm-hmm.
I hear
Mm-hmm.
that in their voice. And so now I'm like, okay, what do 35, 36s sound like to me? And on and on. So yeah,
Yes. Yes.
these are just examples of ways that we integrate or ways that things show up.
I remember the quote.
What is it?
The mastery of anything is the basics well done.
The basics well done. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've heard that when people talk about like if you're a bakery, for example, you should be able to make an amazing chocolate chip cookie. And if you can make an amazing chocolate chip cookie, then that tells you how the rest of the bakery is going to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Mm-hmm.
you can judge a bakery based upon how well done their chocolate chip cookie is because
Mm-hmm.
that's such a basic thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
These are how our brains worked.
Here's us in real time.
What's in there? We don't know. We don't know what's going to come out. Finding parallels.
Our ADHD and all that right live for you.
Yep.
So there was something I was going to ask you. I need to write things down when you're talking.
Was it to do with my emotionality
Probably.
thing? Hmm.
It'll come back.
Okay. I'll just keep talking. No, uh,
So what about your stories yesterday? There was something that's what it was about. There was something else in your stories yesterday that I wanted to pick your brain about.
Was it my example that I shared with Thomas?
Yes.
Yeah. Um, so this is kind of segueing. We're not really talking about the basics anymore, but you're on this ride with us, everybody. um, just to, I did have some people messaging me wanting me to like elaborate on some things and also offering me other perspectives of like ways that they process um being a defined solar plexus being, especially with the solar plexus to throat. So, um, this was just coming up in conversation a lot in my DMs. And I was thinking about how I watched this reality show and I've I can't find their birth times, but I can tell you for sure that that the woman has 1222 and that the man is an undefined solar plexus. And when they're talking, he is consistently talking about how emotional she is and how she can't just come at him calmly. And he says the word soft too. He's like, I want her to be soft. I want her to be calm. He talks about how she is so emotional and just expresses so emotionally. And it just like brought up some shadow for me around that where you know, even a couple years ago, and even up until recently, it's like there's certain aspects of your deconditioning process where you don't realize that you weren't fully accepting parts of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, for me, the way it's shown up is somebody else accepts that part of me. And that's what brings up how much I wasn't accepting that part of me. It's almost the opposite where it's like you expect it's somebody like in the example I'm giving with this couple where he's not accepting her. He's actually not enjoying her emotional expression and he's making it mean something about him when she's just being herself. And I've had my fair share of that happen in my life. And there was a lot to kind of process around that. But lately, it's been other people are fully accepting of who I am. And then I'm realizing how I'm not accepting of it because of their full acceptance. Right. So, my example here is Thomas and I got in a conflict like 2 weeks ago, and we're both emotional, right? So we've still been processing it on and off the last couple weeks. And in our conflict, I had this like emotional explosion, this tantrum. And I haven't had one of those moments in a really long time. I do think the more that defined emotionals can connect with their emotionality and feel it and accept it and let it breathe, the less often you have these kind of explosive moments, especially like directed at somebody. And this was very much directed towards him. And looking back, 2020 is always hindsight. And I just had a lot that needed to be expressed. And it was, I feel unfairly like splooged onto him. And I did need to accept responsibility and accountability for that afterwards and, see where I needed to like I don't know, not like see where I needed to apologize for some things, but also find the nuggets of truth. Because I do think when we're in a certain part of our wave, there's always pieces of truth. It's not the whole truth. There's no truth in the now, but there's nuggets of truth. So we got to kind of like debrief all of that together and talk about the truth that was there and, where I wished I had done things differently, where I'll do things differently in the future, that kind of thing. And he ended up saying, he was like, you know what, though? I kind of love when you explode like that. And I don't remember his exact words. I think he said it was captivating or something along those lines, where he was really witnessing me in all of my everything, in all of my glory, and meeting it with such utter acceptance, not making me wrong, even though from my lens, I made a mistake in how I approached it, and was just like, I kind of like it. And he said it helps him learn about me. And he even like did a little impression of me, and it made me laugh so hard. It was like the levity that he brought to the situation was like, he's like, yeah, you always start with question. So you'll ask, like, it's usually you asking me a favor, like, can you do this thing later? And he's like, And then you'll walk away and then you'll come back and be like, and did you ever think of it? It's like I launch into something else.
We will. Yeah, yeah.
It's like just the
Mhm.
question. He's like, yeah, babe, I'll do anything for you for sure. And then all good. And then I walk away and I come back and I'm like, and also, like,
And while we're at it,
yeah, while we're talking about this,
they have your attention.
I think that's it too. It's like you feel like they're really listening to you when
Uh-huh.
you're asking to do a favor.
Mhm.
And I realize that this is my pattern and this is the way that I confront things with him is like I kind of ease it in, see if he's really paying attention, see if he's really has the space for me. I think it's almost a temperature check of like, does he feel open right now? Does he feel like he has a space for me?
Mhm.
But it was like it brought so much levity to have him impersonate me. And, don't get me wrong, at a certain part of that in my wave that may have bothered me or something. Like, but I was fully in the space to be able to receive his perception of me in those
Mhm.
situations. And I could laugh at myself and we could both like take that as data and just learn from it. Right.
Mhm.
Um, and also I think I just had this like healing or this resolution around seeing myself. And even I feel like I was kind of beating myself up after that. I remember saying to him, oh, I feel really bad for how I expressed myself and I wish I would have handled that differently. And like, I just
Mhm.
I felt bad about it. And I think this is something defined emotionals typically go through when we express ourselves in a moment of heightened emotions, is we'll feel this hangover afterwards of like, oh shit, now that the emotions are past, I really wish I wouldn't have said that, or I really wish I would have handled things differently. But I don't think that waiting for clarity means that we are even having that awareness of waiting for clarity. Like sometimes we're just not immune to the rush of emotions that
Mhm.
comes through. And that is such a patience and awareness practice to be present with that and to not act on it. And I'm not immune to that. I
Mhm.
would say like 85% of the time, I'm like pretty solid with not acting on it. But there's still that 15-20% of the time where I'm having to observe myself do that and feel some type of way about it afterwards. And
Mhm.
him just like not like he's innocence motivation. So I think that's part of it where he's just like, he's just getting to observe me. He's not making me wrong. He's not making himself wrong. It was just, yeah, that happened. And I think innocence motivation people have a really good way of like not making anybody wrong in a situation
Mhm.
where I was very quick to try to make myself wrong and be like,
Right.
I shouldn't even be feeling this way or like
Mhm.
whatever and like
Mhm.
invalidate my feelings. Um, yeah. So having him just meet that with utter acceptance, it was like, wow, I really can be all of me, even when I'm fucking up, even when I'm an
Mhm.
emotional mess, even when I'm exploding.
Mhm.
Thank God it doesn't happen very often. And this isn't a permission slip to be abusive, to be emotionally abusive to anybody or to berate anybody. Like I imagine if that were happening every day in our relationship or even every week, he would feel some type of way about that. And that wouldn't be a healthy dynamic. But you know, once a year,
Right.
whenever I can't remember the last time I exploded like that. I think also him and I have been under like immense stress the last couple months. And when your stress levels are high, like you're almost like not able to have that heightened awareness that I normally have or that grace or that delicacy. It's like with 1222, you're either graceful or you're the opposite of that. And I find that when my stress levels are high, I feel disempowered around something, I don't have as much grace.
Well, that because I feel like our nervous systems are so closely tied to how our designs can express,
Yep.
you know? And God bless our husbands. I'll just tell you that. We've got, we've
God
got some
bless.
we've, they're amazing. They're like the shit that they have to deal with us. Not deal with, but like be with us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say
Mm-hmm.
deal with. I want to say be with. And the level of acceptance that they have for us that like you said shows us the level of acceptance that we can have for ourselves
Mm-hmm.
is just amazing. The other day because I've had countless conversations with Andy about giving me things to respond to because my little 3410, I'll just be doing my own thing, you know. And I'm like, you need to ask me, like, pull me out of that and ask me questions. And so the other day, I had gotten home from work, and when I'm at inner space, I'm on my feet the whole time, you know, back and forth all over the building. I get like 10,000 steps in by like 2 o'clock. And I came home and I sat on the couch and I was like, ah. And mind you, I've been working a lot. So I haven't had the normal amount of alone time that I'm used to as an undefined emotional. So I've been trying to grab that in little bits and bites. And while I wasn't home alone, it feels very different. Andy was like in the kitchen and by his desk, and he comes over and he's like, "You want to go on a walk?" And I'm like, I didn't really want to go on a walk, but I felt obligated to because it was nice out and, you know, whatever. I'm like, sure. And I get off the couch, and that's a no for me, right? Sure. That's not
Sure.
a
Yeah,
yes.
there's no response
So
there.
I get off the couch and I start like trauma response cleaning the kitchen. Like I'm not going on a walk, but all of a sudden I'm in the kitchen just like noticing that the dishes need done and, you know, all these things. And I'm just like irritated and, you know, whatever. We didn't end up going on the walk, but later I was like, hey, earlier, because I started getting short with him. I wasn't like mean directed at him, but I was just not pleasant to be around.
Mm.
And I was like, hey, that earlier when you asked me if I wanted to go on a walk, that was just me feeling like you thought what I was doing wasn't okay. And so
Mm.
I had this response in my body that was like, what you're doing is not okay. Somebody wants you to do something else. You're not good enough, you know, like whatever stories are going to start running. And so I just vocalized that to him. And I was like, it's not personal, but that's what I was experiencing at that time was
Mm.
that just relaxing wasn't okay, but I needed to be productive. And he was like, that's cool. So chill about it. And very understanding. He's like, no, that's not, you know, you're fine. I just know that you want me to ask you if you want to go on a walk, if I'm going to go on a walk.
Oh,
I'm like, yeah, I know. But some
yeah.
cleaning got done.
Yeah.
Some dishes got done.
You're avoiding the thing, so you did
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's just to say that they,
Yeah.
you know, I'm very grateful that we have husbands that we can process those things with. And like, because a lot of that shame stuff comes up from when we were little, and a lot of it has to do with our definition, you know, what you're doing, because I'm designed to, I want to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
And that's not okay. Like, you need to
Mhm.
be doing something else or productive or contributing. You know, I'm like, I contribute enough. Let me do what I want to do.
Yeah, and I think this is such a good example of how our minds will latch on to something or latch onto a feeling or
Mm,
a story and create something that's not there, right?
yeah.
So he very innocently was like, "Oh, I'm going to go on a walk. I wonder if she'd want to come with me." And then your
Yeah.
mind is like creating a whole story about him
Oh,
asking you a
yeah.
simple question.
Yeah, he thinks I'm not good enough. I've been sitting on the couch for 10 minutes. I've hardly been on the couch. And I just got home from work and I just want to sit and maybe what I'm doing isn't good enough. And he's never thought that.
I
But
know.
I'm like, wow.
It's I mean, I've had the same situation with Thomas because I'm married to a 3420. Like, he's always busy. I cannot compare myself to him. And he even admits that. He's like, I'm fucking superhuman. Like, nobody
Yeah.
should compare themselves to me. And, I'll have nothing going on that day. Maybe I
Yeah.
have my 1 or 2 days off where I just don't really have much happening. And I'll be laying on the couch and he's like, what are you doing today? And my mind is like, he's making sure that I'm productive. But he's literally just like, what are you doing today?
Yeah.
And I could even hear it in a different tone to create the story that I want to create out of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Andy will do that shit because I'll be like, oh, I'm so bored. And he's like, I'm literally never bored. I don't even know what boredom feels like because he's so mental that he
Hmm.
can always find something to do. And just because he like has tons of interests and hobbies
Yeah.
and you know, if he's well, if he ever was bored, he would just read, and I have to like respond to shit. And I'm like, I don't know what that's like to never be bored. It's like we're very opposite in that. And even when he's like, I don't know what it's like to be bored, I'm like, this motherfucker is judging me for being bored.
And it's like, no, he's not. He's just sharing, and he's also personal view, right? So he's just going to
Hmm.
share his
Yeah.
perspective of what
Yeah.
he knows.
Yeah.
And it can be so easy to like take that as he's creating something.
And yeah, because I'm like, oh, are you trying to tell me that I shouldn't be bored? Like, he's not. He's just like, oh, that's weird. I don't know what boredom is. And
Yeah.
okay.
I feel like when, and I don't know what this would be that is deconditioning for you. Maybe a lot of generators go through this where we're used to being these little like worker bees, like
Hmm.
constantly
Hmm.
using our sacral. And then when we're deconditioning, there's going to be those periods where the sacral is just turned off
Hmm.
and we're like, we're not
Well,
responding to anything.
ego too for me. Like
Yeah.
I've been working a lot, which I've had the energy for. I've been sleeping great. I've been feeling fucking amazing, by the way. Like, if you're a generator and you're listening to this and you aren't feeling good, you're not respond you might not be responding to the right things because like I feel like it's a 180-degree change of how I feel when I'm legitimately responding to life.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, anyway, it's on a tangent.
Well, you were saying too, like your ego might be.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks. Um, it's my day off, guys. My ego just like stops, that it's like done. It shuts
Mhm.
down. My ego's not my authority, but I'm also powered by that. So my willpower and it just turns off and I'm like, ego out, done for the day.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, it's very different.
Yeah.
So I'm learning to be okay with that also. Like as a sacral being with a defined ego, like allowing myself to rest. Um, and not willpowering through and trying to like create false response to things.
Like false productivity. It's
Yeah,
like I
yeah,
feel like defined egos know what they're capable of. And so
yeah.
when they have those moments of not doing anything and not being productive, it almost, you know, you can have issues with your self-worth and productivity and all that, regardless if you have ego definition or not, right? So even defined egos deal with that to an extent because I feel like defined egos get used to being like praised for
Mm,
their
mm-hmm,
willpower and what they're capable
mm-hmm,
of doing. And so then they're like, oh my God, yeah, I can do so much. I'm like superhuman when I have the willpower for something. But then when you don't,
mm-hmm.
you're like, oh no, I'm not adding value to the world or I'm not contributing. I
Right,
know what I'm capable of,
right.
you know?
It's wild the difference, the way that I look at Andy being a projector with a defined ego versus me with a defined ego with a sacral, because I'll give him all the grace in the world when his ego off, or I'll even remind him like, rest.
Yeah.
But when I try to do it the way that I shame myself is wild.
Wow.
And there's that whole narrative in human design, when you first get into human design, you're like, here projectors need naps and take rests. And there's not, all types need rest.
Hmm.
All definitions need rest. No matter, no matter if you're a reflector all the way to a 9 centered defined quad split.
Hmm. Yeah.
Everybody needs rest.
I think I think it's harped on for non-sacrals, especially projectors, because they don't have anything that's
Mm-hmm.
signaling to them
Mm-hmm.
like you're
Mm-hmm.
overdoing it. They'll just go forever and
Right.
then get
Right.
sick or whatever. So I get it. I totally get that. But I think
Absolutely.
everybody has their threshold for that.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely should be talked about as like no matter what your type is, you're
Yeah.
gonna need to be aware of when you're on and when you're off and
Yeah.
what your capacity is. And something that I find interesting about defined ego is like a lot of the sessions that I attract a lot of defined egos because I'm open there, right? It's like a magnet. And a lot of my clients have defined egos. And I feel like they're the ones that are telling me, like, as a kid, they were called lazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think not that undefined egos don't struggle with that too, but I think because there's almost this sturdiness to the defined ego that's like, I'm not going to do that and I don't feel bad about that.
Mhm.
You know?
Mhm. Mhm.
It's like, and think of them as a child where they
Mhm.
really don't care. And
Mhm.
then early on, that idea gets planted that, oh, you're lazy if you don't have the will for this. Why can't I just push you around and get you to do what I want?
Mhm.
You know, and then you start internalizing that, and it's just like a whole different situation than open egos.
The person that rests the most in my house is the generator, is Weston. So it's just chilling. He'll come home from school. I'll be like, "Hey, we got to do this, this." He's like, "Mom, I need to lay down. I was just at school for 8 hours. I need to
Boundaries,
rest."
and that's on
Yeah.
healthy boundaries. Thank
Yeah.
you, Weston.
And I catch myself, because he's like, this is what goes through my mind. Like, well, if you like, you want to do this thing, you should have the energy for it. And I feel like if I had a projector child, I'd be like, oh, please rest after school. You
Yeah.
know,
But he's
he's
also the
like,
only open ego,
he is the only open ego. Yeah.
which that was me growing up. Like I remember having no problem just being like, yeah, I'm just gonna go lay down. You know, my mom would be like, but the dishes need to be done and the trash
Yeah.
needs to be taken out. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll get to it when I get to
Yeah.
it.
And then he'll wake up or not wake up because he doesn't actually sleep. He just goes and lays in his bed and he'll come out of his room and be like, "Can we go to Dollar General? I just saw this thing on TikTok." Blah, blah. Like he'll have a response and I'm like, "You got to do the dishwasher first." And he's like, "I don't want to do the dishwasher. Never mind." And he'll go back to his room. I'm like, "No, that's not a negotiation. Like you still, whether we go to Dollar General or Dollar Tree or not, you need to do the dishwasher to like live in this house." You have to help.
Yep.
And he'll just be like, I'm not interested in that." Just go back. And I'm like,
It's because you've raised him to be himself
I
and
know.
to be really honest with how he's feeling at any given moment.
I
And you've
know.
given him the space to do that instead of shaming him.
I know.
You're like, and now I have to deal with a differentiated child.
Right?
Oh
I'm sure
man.
those of you listening who are, raising your children with just awareness of their design and understanding, you're like, yep. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like, I'm trying to not make it wrong. And it's really hard for Andy and I both because, Andy's still working on deconditioning around this.
Well,
Um,
we all are, right?
oh,
I think
oh,
you can know that
absolutely.
on an intellectual level that Weston is differentiated and he's
Yeah.
just being himself and this is really good for him.
Yeah.
And at the same time, all of our fucking seven-centered conditioning that we've been like indoctrinated with our whole lives is still there and needs to be worked through.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not just easy peasy just because you know it. You're still going to have that shit come up
Mm-hmm.
where you're
Mm-hmm.
like having to check yourself and be like, "Oh
Mm-hmm.
shit, that's my
Mm-hmm.
conditioning."
Oh yeah, all the time in our house. Like that's
Yeah.
like everyone's checking themselves all the time. Especially, and I've mentioned this before with Weston's diet, he's alternating and he's still alternating on peanut butter jelly. Still fucking
Old
A.
Faithful.
Can't believe it. Can you
Old
eat any
Faithful.
more peanut butter jelly? I don't think it's
It's
possible.
specific though, right? Is it like a specific type of jelly and like
It's a specific type of jelly and a
yep,
specific type of peanut butter and a specific type of bread
yep.
and pretzels. And I'm like, okay, I'm just like making myself okay with peanut butter has protein. Okay. Okay. Like,
He's getting all
it's
the food
okay.
groups.
My mind wants to be like, eat some meat. Because me and Andy will just be like eating ribeyes, you
Yep.
know?
Yep.
Like, like,
But you
hey,
gotta just
we made this wonderful dinner, like ribeyes and potatoes. That's like our standard. And
meat and
Weston's like,
potatoes.
peanut butter jelly. And I'm like, all right.
I feel like
Cool.
the parents with alternating children out there have great stories. Alternating
Yeah.
and taste
Yeah.
or yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Taste and appetite.
closed and open taste.
Yep. Yeah. And it's just like you gotta just trust. I just like there's nothing more that I trust fall into more than just letting my kid eat exactly what he wants. And I'm like, oh my
Yeah. What you were telling me how you'll like buy a bunch of the thing that he's obsessing over and then as soon as you buy a bunch of it, he's like, I'm onto something else. My
God. Yeah.
friend was telling me she has open taste kid, and he's like a toddler, maybe he's like 3 or 4, but she'll always tell me stories where he'll eat something and then not like it and spit it out, but he'll try
Yeah.
anything. But
Yeah.
then she like he also goes through phases, and she said the same thing happens where she'll buy a bunch of stuff. She's like, that's all he wanted was strawberries. Just like he ate 2 things of strawberries by himself, so I bought a whole thing of them, and now he doesn't want them anymore.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
what we connected. It's usually when the seasons are starting to change, his
Yeah.
obsession with
Yeah.
something will shift.
Yeah. Weston's obsessed with strawberries right now too, actually. Strawberries with whipped cream in a can. He wanted he actually wanted Cool Whip, and I'm like, furthest thing from nature, bro. But I wouldn't get him the Cool Whip. I was like, oh, we'll settle with whipped cream in a can. Like, I'll just make the whipped cream. That's what I would do normally. But he's like, no, mom, we don't have to home make everything.
He has a point. Let's not shame any Cool Whip lovers out
No,
there.
we're not shaming
Just
the Cool
kidding. I'm
Whip.
just
I'm
kidding.
just like, I can't let you have that. Um, but last night
Why are you
he was
controlling what he has taste for?
I'm not because I'm in control of the money. I tell him all the time, I'm like, you can buy whatever you, when we're at the store, I'm like, you can buy the Cool Whip. You have tap to pay on your phone with your allowance money. And he's like, I'm not spending my money on that. I'm like, neither am I.
I guess he doesn't really
So,
want it then.
yeah. But last night when he was trying to figure out what to have for dinner, which was peanut butter jelly, um, before the peanut butter and jelly, he always like questions if he should have something different. And I'm like, go out to the freezer. There's tons of food in there that you hyperfixated on for a while, and it's just living in there. Why don't you go see if you respond to anything? And he's like, no, I think I'll just have peanut butter jelly. I'm like, okay,
That's fine.
yeah, that's cool. I'm serious. I go to Costco, I get like the super crunchy Skippy. I can't even, I've tried to get him to do homemade peanut butter, but he won't do it. Super crunchy Skippy, like 2 pack, and then a big grape jelly from Aldi. And we go through like a grape jelly from Aldi like every 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
It's
Hey,
wild out there.
Skippy peanut butter is so good though.
It is. It
I
is. Yeah.
have always
It
been
is.
like, well, for like probably like I don't know, since I was a teenager, I've been a natural peanut butter
Mm-hmm.
gal because that's also what my mom would buy. She would just like,
Mm-hmm.
my mom's always been kind of crunchy, hippie, whatever. And
Yeah.
then one day I was at Costco and I was like, I can buy whatever peanut butter I want. I don't really like the taste of natural peanut butter.
Yeah.
I was
Right.
like, I'm buying Skippy.
I know. We're adults. We can do what we want.
Yes. I
I
have like a lot of conditioning around that because my mom would always buy the healthy version of something. And I'd be
mhm,
like,
mhm.
and so I can kind of relate to Weston sometimes when he's like, I just want the not healthy version of
Yeah.
it.
I had a new awareness around my determination. I'm cold thirst and I love fruit, right? But my lack of executive functioning doesn't allow me to like cut the fruit up when I get home. And also my frugalness and conditioning around spending money sometimes, which is wild because I will spend money on things that you wouldn't think, and then I will save money in the weirdest places. But around fruit, and I was like, every time I'd go to the store, oh, I want a watermelon. Oh, I have to cut it up. Our fridge is smaller at this house. I don't have enough room, blah, blah, blah. And I would talk myself out of getting what I actually was having a response for because I didn't have the energy to like execute the cutting of the fruit. And then we were at the store and I saw these, they were like perfectly long rectangle watermelon spears, like in a plastic, like they were pre-cut by the store. And I was like, oh, I want those so bad. And I picked them up and it was like $16 for these fucking pieces of watermelon.
They
And
upcharge it that much.
yes.
Holy crap.
And I would looked at Andy and I was like, I'm buying these. And he's like, okay. And I'm just like, I'm just letting you know they're $16. And he's like, okay. Like, and I'm just saying, I'm working through my own shit right now. I'm buying these watermelons.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And I bought a whole bunch of other pre-cut fruit and it wasn't organic. And I was just like, I will actually eat the fruit. It's either me not buy the fruit or buy the fruit and pre-cut. And I did it. And so I'm just like
I think
these
this is
weird
a
little
really
things.
good example of how our minds can try to intercept our response, right?
Ah,
Like
yeah.
even with the Skippy peanut butter, I was like, my mind's like, well, there's hydrogenated oils in that. And it's like
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And but then when I ate it, I was like, this is so satisfying,
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing. It's like I don't know. I'm getting to a phase with food where I just give zero fucks when it comes to all the like obviously I still try to like eat a balanced diet, but like when it comes to all these little things that I used to obsess over, like organic or not, every little ingredient, it's just like I don't have the brain space for it.
Mm-mm.
And I actually realize what my body's responding to, and it's usually very different than what my mind thinks I should respond to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was talking to you on the phone last week when I was like, "Hey, I'm like, I want juice, like fresh juice," and I have a juicer and I know how to do it all, and I've lived that life. And then I was like, all of a sudden, I was calling the juice place, and I placed an order for juice, or I was walking in the juice place, placed an order for juice in a gallon. Like they fresh press it and do it and charge you $25 for this gallon of juice. And my brain's like, you can make that for like $6 at home and it would take forever and all of that. And I'm just like, but I won't actually do it. And then I will eat something that I don't actually want, that's not actually satisfying,
Mm-hmm.
or drink something that's not satisfying. And so that's where I'm at.
Sometimes I wonder
Decondition.
if that's like, I mean, it could be ADHD, it could be
Oh, yeah.
struggle, because I feel like we both do that where
Uh-huh.
we like purposely make something more difficult than it needs to be. And I think this is just such a good example of making like a mental decision about something. It's like
Mm-hmm.
your authority is going to take you the path of least resistance, even with these little things. I know it's
Right.
more authority is more important for big decisions in life, whatever, but you can even start looking at it on the micro level.
Right.
And I think about when I was obsessed with cottage cheese, and I still love it, but there was like a phase where I was eating it like multiple times a day.
Yep.
And I was like, I found a recipe on TikTok. It was like, you can make cottage cheese and it's cheaper and
Oh.
blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh my God. Because it really was stemmed from I want this specific brand and it was going viral on TikTok. So it was always sold out. And so I'm
Mhm.
like, I want that flavor because it tastes like homemade cottage cheese, you
Mhm.
know? And once you've had that taste, like whatever other brands are
Mhm.
just gross.
Yep.
So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make it myself. And everybody on TikTok is like, it's not that hard. Da, 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 da. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get the nut milk bags and I'm gonna like learn to make this. And yeah, it wasn't that hard, but it was time. It took up a lot of time. And
Mhm.
so for me, when I know if I've already done something one time and I'm like, oh, that's gonna take up a lot of time and patience and energy or whatever, I'm much less likely to do it. So I'll buy
Mhm.
all this stuff to do a thing and I do it one time and I'm like, that was way more struggle than necessary.
Uh-huh.
And I
Uh-huh.
don't want to do that anymore because
Uh-huh.
I've owned the juicer too.
Yeah.
And, you know, the homemade everything in the kitchen where you're like, yeah, I'll make my own nut, like nut butter or nut
Yeah.
milk or
Yeah.
whatever. And then it ends up just being so much more annoying.
Yeah.
Like I would
Yeah.
rather pay the upcharge. It's like with the cut fruit. I'd rather just know that I'm gonna have fruit ready to go, pay
Right.
for the upcharge, than have to cut it myself.
Well, also there was that thing that I learned on TikTok, like all the time I would cut up cantaloupe and watermelon, and it would kind of taste like garlic. And I
Hmm.
was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I had some weird stuff happen to my smell and taste with COVID, and it kind of like lingers here and there. And I was like, maybe it's that. And then this one TikTok came up one day and it was like, does your watermelon or cut fruit like often taste like garlic? It's because you're using the same cutting board that
Yeah, I
you.
was gonna say, duh. I noticed that as a kid. I used to get so mad at my mom because she'd cut me up an apple, and I come from a garlic family. Like my mom just eats cloves of garlic for
Yeah.
fun. And
Yeah.
so everything would taste like garlic. And I'd be like, can we have a fruit specific cutting board? Like I would ask that of her. And then I realized, oh, maybe that's why people color code them. You
Yeah.
know how you can buy a
Yeah.
pack and they're all different colors? I'm
We
like,
have that pack, but we don't use it. We only use it for the meat and fish or whatever. But yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then I'm like,
ugh,
because then
it's
I was
so
like,
gross.
Andy, the cut fruit from the store never tastes like garlic. That was before I saw that TikTok, and I'm like, and then I saw that TikTok, and I was like, what the fuck?
Man, we've really gone off the rails here in this conversation.
I'll even go so radical that I'll like grow my own watermelon. I mean, I know how to do all the things. I talked about this on my stories a couple weeks ago when I found tortellini made in Italy that Andy can eat,
Hmm.
and I was like, I can make my own fucking pasta. I can make all my own stuff. I have all the skills. Like I have all the knowledge to do it. I don't want to.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to.
And that's on being raised in America where everything convenient is at your fingertips.
Right. And it's like, if I have a response for that watermelon, and I got my first paycheck from Inner Space last month well, I got it at the beginning of May. So my first ever paycheck. So I can buy that fruit. Like,
Yeah. The ways that we rationalize certain things.
right. Buy my own fruit. What?
What, bitches?
Like, look at Andy. I'm like, I'm paying for my fruit, even though our money all goes in the same bank account.
Right. You're like, this, just so you know, this came out of my
This
check.
came out of my check. I'm buying this $16 watermelon cut. Yeah. So it's just interesting the layers that we can go into with deconditioning. And I know that somebody asked about determination, I think, and how like so much of our old programming is still in there in these little ways that we don't realize. Like we think like, oh yeah, following my strategy and authority. I'm responding. I'm doing the thing. And then all of a sudden you have a run in with some cut watermelon and you're like, my life is a sham. I am not following my strategy and authority at all.
I feel like we're trying to get the train back on the tracks after it went off the tracks now.
Ah.
We're like, okay, bringing this back to determination.
Yeah.
Like, I know we just talked about cut watermelon for 5 minutes.
Don't shame yourself. But just like being and having that awareness and that openness to check in with yourself and just like call yourself out sometimes and to be like, hey, and also it's all good. Like that's the layers and the spiral of you know, deeper understanding and awareness of yourself and your process and whatever you're going through and just being able to watch it and be like, no, that was really interesting. That was really cool. Or it's funny
Mhm.
that I thought that, or, you know,
Dude.
I I thought they had to be this way and thought thinks from the mind. When really, look at this.
Yeah. Deconditioning is not for the faint of heart because you
Right.
have to really be able to be honest with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many times over the last, like, I'm coming up on 7 years. There's been so many times where I've been denying myself of that honesty because I'm still letting my conditioning
Mm-hmm.
win, you know?
Yeah.
Which again, there can be healthy conditioning, conditioning isn't bad, whatever. But like, I think part of the deconditioning process is just realizing what conditioning is unhealthy for you and is leading you away from
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And knowing that you can trust fall into things like buying the $16 watermelon and also getting paid for the first time in that same month. Look at that.
Look
Look
at
at how
that.
supported I am. Like,
Look at
whoa,
you.
look at that. Um, and just being okay with it all.
Mm-hmm.
And remembering that when those things come up for you, like they're happening with everybody around you.
Yeah.
And to be
And
gentle and have grace for everybody.
yeah. And just like to kind of bring this back to what we were talking about at the beginning and life is smarter than us.
Mm,
I think we can zoom out and see, oh, I thought this was going to end up this way.
mm,
And you can even think about that with your deconditioning process. I thought my process was going to lead me here, and it actually
hmm.
led me all over the
Yeah.
place and then here,
Yeah.
and you don't know where a decision is going to lead you. And that's kind of been my experience recently is realizing by responding to certain things, I was like planting all these little seeds, but I didn't know what I was doing or where I was going to end up. And my sacral channel is completely unconscious. So I think sometimes when I'm responding, I'm like, I know I'm responding to something, but I have no idea what's going to happen with that. It's hard to even fantasize about it because I'm like, I know I can feel like the energy for this thing, but like, who knows where this is going to lead me?
Hmm.
Um, and it's just interesting how the mind will be like almost trying to distract you, like, hey, you should be doing this over here. Why aren't you doing this? But then you're responding to something else over here,
Hmm.
and you're like, why would I even waste my time over there? Because this is where my energy is taking me. And I
Mhm.
think that's what makes it confusing for people is the mind is still trying to intercept what you actually have the energy for.
Back to the plant growing out of the concrete. What I just saw was like our minds will be like, we'll plant our seeds, right? You're walking out to your garden, you plant your seeds, and your mind's like, water them every day. And these are the seeds that you water. And then you have like a response to start watering the concrete cracks or something. And you're
Yeah,
like,
and you're
I
like,
don't
why
know
am I doing this?
why am I pouring water over here? You know? Or there's a leak in your hose and you don't have a response to fix it and it's on on the patio. It's just pouring water into the patio. And all of a sudden, like the biggest and the best sunflower grows out of that crack.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, that was totally like, I didn't even. And then the ones you're watering, they like die. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
well, my mind told me, and none of it's wrong.
That even just makes me think about like, so my parents own the house that I live in. I rent from them. And all growing up, like, because they've had this house, we moved to the house that they currently live in when I was 6. And so all growing up, I would hear about how like my mom, who's a projector, wanted to sell this house so badly and just like not have to worry about it, right? Because she's like, I don't have the energy for that. My dad's a 2034. He, I don't know, he's the 45. They have the 4521 and he's the 45. So he's like, what do we have? Like, that piece of it. And he would fight her tooth and nail on keeping this house. And his reasoning was always like, we never know what we're going to need it for. And they had to deal with so much bullshit. They had a family live here for like 20 years, right? And when I was like 22 or 23, like every house that I would rent would then end up going up for sale. And so I was having to move like every year. Like since I turned 18, I lived in a new place every year, which I think is really common for people. But I
Hmm.
was just getting so sick of moving every year. And my mom was like, well, why don't you guys live in the house? And it was when Thomas and I first moved in together the first time. But, anyways,
Hmm.
this is a roundabout story to say my dad had no idea what he was hanging on to this house for.
Hmm.
And now I'm like, thank fucking God, because we've had a place to live the last like 12 years
Hmm.
and we've had stability and, rent stability. Like our rent hasn't increased and all of that. And it was like worth it for him to hang on to it and like not have any idea what it was going to be used for.
Hmm.
And my mom's mind was always like, this doesn't make any sense. Da, 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 da. But he did not have a response to do any of the things. Like she would like poke at him, to sell it. And now she's like, oh yeah, it's a great investment to have, like whatever. Now she's like happy that they still have it, even though it's hard being a landlord. So I get why she wanted to sell it for sure, because it was annoying. But yeah, you just
Now
never know.
she gets to be your landlord.
Now she's my landlord. Yeah. My parents were really good landlords, though. The best.
They are. They take care of things quickly.
They do. And they don't price gouge us.
That's good. That's good. Awesome.
Cool.
Feeling complete.
Yeah, I feel complete. I hope y'all enjoyed this very
Shot of
like what did we
espresso.
even talk
Shot of
about?
espresso today, guys.
I mean, this is just a really good example of an actual phone conversation we would
Yeah.
have. Like, this is how our phone conversations are. So, you're welcome for being let in on this nonsense.
Yeah, they are typically hours in length right now, actually, our work schedules are lining up really well where I get off of work when Teresa's getting ready for work. So we talk while she
Hmm.
gets ready for work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because for a while, we weren't able to talk for like a couple days sometimes.
Oh,
And I'm like,
man.
I feel like we're getting divorced. It's like,
It's,
I was like, what
it's,
is like it hasn't ever really felt like we're long distance besties because we talk so
yeah.
often. Like,
Yeah.
and I think we do a good job of visiting each other too.
Hmm.
But I think it's also because we've had a good amount of free time
Right.
the last couple
Right.
years. So we've just been able to talk like all day if we want to,
Yeah. Yeah.
on and off. And I'm
Yeah.
like, this is what it's like to actually have a long distance best friend where you're both busy and
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, what the hell? but we don't have a codependent relationship, so that's what makes it like feel sustainable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, because I'm just like, oh, we'll talk when we talk. Like
yeah,
neither of us take it personally. It just is what it is. And
yeah,
we don't like need each other like that.
no,
Like,
it just
but
lines up.
it just works out. So,
And our time change now too is 2 hours because
oh yeah,
Teresa's
that
doesn't
does
celebrate daylight savings. So
celebrate. Yep.
now we're 2 hours apart, and it's hard because I'll get up and I'll want to talk to her in the morning, and then I'm like, it's you know 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning where she's at. We can't talk,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but it all
So,
works out.
some of this was probably a conversation that we would have had,
Yeah.
but you guys just get to watch because we wanted to podcast too, you know?
Yeah, we brought some of it in because we started on a phone conversation. Then we're like, let's hop on and record. So
Yeah.
yeah,
But
as always, if you have any suggestions for topics or anything that you want us to touch on, you can DM us or comment on YouTube.
yeah,
It's
clearly we need
really
things to respond to, or else we'll just talk about melons and shit.
right. We have a really good idea for a podcast. I don't know when we'll be able to record it, but
Yeah,
we talked about it.
we want to talk about signature.
Yeah.
And we have a few people in mind because we want each type to come on like almost like a panel podcast.
Yep.
And so we want each type to be represented to talk about their experience with their signature.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you have suggestions for other types, obviously we have the sacral piece of that or the satisfaction piece of that covered, but
Mm-hmm.
we have a projector in mind.
We do.
So,
We do. I have a reflector in mind.
ooh, okay. So we just need a manifester. So we're
Ooh.
informing
Hey.
manifestors out there that are deep in their deconditioning that feel like they have a well-rounded, experience of peace.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna dive in. That'll be
Throwing
a
it
good
out there.
one. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Be
Mm-hmm.
like a coffee shop talk.
Ooh, yeah.
Mm.
Awesome.
Right.
All right. Well,
All right,
thanks for
everybody.
listening. We'll see you next time.
Peace out.